Preparing to live stream. Okay, you should be live streaming now.
Okay.
Go for it.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another installment of the gardening series put on by a consortium of libraries in the area and hosted by the Augusta Library. My name is Brandon Wyarda. I'm going to talk about CSA farming today. I am part co-owner and part operator of Sleepy Root Farm. We used to be a CSA farm. Several years ago, we discontinued doing our CSA and we now sell garlic mainly, but I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So in this presentation, we're going to talk about briefly what CSAs are, do a little brief history of CSAs, what it's like to be a member of a CSA, tips on how to use your CSA share if you want to get one, and how to find a CSA if you're looking to find one. Also, we're going to go over somewhat of what it is like to be a farmer for a CSA. So if you're a person who's also interested in being a CSA, stick around as well, and we'll talk a little bit more about getting into it and farming side of it towards the end of the presentation here. I don't know if people are able to ask questions while this is going on, but if you can ask questions, go ahead and ask them and be happy to answer while we're in the talk. If any of the hosts are available to chime in quickly here, do you know if they can ask questions through audio, or is that something in chat only?
If they are in a YouTube, if they sign into YouTube, they can put that in the chat in YouTube.
Okay, gotcha. And is there anywhere that I'd be able to see that, or would someone else be able to chime in?
We will pass those on to you.
Okay, perfect. That'd be great. Okay, so feel free to ask questions whenever you want to. Otherwise, there will be time at the end to do some question and answer. So a very brief history of CSA farms. Community supported agriculture is what CSA stands for. And it is essentially that. It's communities that have gotten together to support agricultural operations, primarily market gardens. So vegetable farms is where it mainly originated at in the United States. They started popping up in the US in the 1980s. There were some earlier forms of it in Japan. It had been talked about as a concept much earlier than that. And there had also been some variations, previously where people had done subscriptions to farms where they'd be able to get, first crack at coming and picking vegetables from the farm, so to speak. And more informal versions of that were happening, throughout the country well before the 1980s for market garden farms. But officially being called CSAs and cropping up in that specific model as the main source of income for a farm really started happening in the 1980s, where it was recognized as its own kind of viable market option. It coincided with the growth of the organic and natural movement, and really stemming out of a lot of people's interest to know where their food was coming from more and how it was grown. There was a lot of increasing concern over use of pesticides and herbicides on food products. And back then, there wasn't such thing as certified organic labels. There wasn't as much being published about standards for how people were growing things. And there really just wasn't a lot of labeling happening on produce or products in the grocery store that were saying specifically how it was grown. So this is kind of the beginning of when people started really pushing for that. And one of the ways they could get it was going directly to farms and asking the farms to grow their food for them. So in some cases, you would get members or groups of people going directly to a farm that they might know and say, hey, we're willing to buy produce from you in advance if you will grow it specifically for us and give us a weekly box or a basket of produce every week. And in some cases, it was people, groups of people soliciting farms for it. And in other cases, it was farms soliciting customers for it, where they would put up flyers or signs around town or word of mouth, where they'd say, we'll grow vegetables for you. And you know where they're going to come from. This is how they're growing. So that's kind of really how it started cropping up. There's been a lot of action happening on the CSA front, in the 40 years since they really started, and it's really just grown in popularity over the years. So what to expect if you become a member of the CSA? There's a lot of different types of CSAs out there. Most of this presentation is going to focus on vegetable CSAs because that's the most common one. And when I say vegetable CSAs or CSAs that do produce, it's mainly vegetables, and there's a few, what most people think of as fruit thrown in there, like watermelons, maybe some berries, maybe some apples, but predominantly vegetables with maybe a sprinkling of fruit involved in there. So most common CSAs will deliver produce grown from their farm once a week or every other week, and they'll bring it to a common pickup location where people can come and get it. The produce shares are usually delivered in late spring, starting in early June, and go through the summer and into fall. Some CSAs will go up until Thanksgiving. Some of them will cut off before Halloween. And shares are typically delivered from 14 to 20 weeks of the year. So mainly just during the peak growing seasons in this part of the country. So when we're talking about this too, I'm also mainly just talking about stuff in our northern climate, because that's kind of what we think of when we think of CSAs around here. Different models exist for ones that are more southern for when their shares are delivered. CSAs often have a newsletter or some means of communicating directly with their members to describe the different items that are in the share for the week and give updates from the farm. So there's all sorts of different add-ons that you can get from CSAs. Some CSAs are just veggie, but some CSAs will do all sorts of different add-ons. So like this CSA in particular, they also offer a cheese share, they offer a meat share, they offer a vegetable share that has 16 deliveries or a vegetable share that has 20 deliveries. And they also are offering a coffee share and a mushroom share. So this CSA has a lot going on for it as far as different things you can add on to. Some people don't want to, pre-buy everything that they're going to eat for the season, but some people really like the convenience of it and really like knowing where all their stuff's coming from. Obviously, the coffee's not coming directly from this farm, but they have, I know this farm has a direct relationship with the cooperative of coffee growers that it comes from, I believe in Central America. So some CSAs will offer add-on products like meat or eggs or these canned goods, or even mushrooms and coffee. And some CSAs will deliver outside of the traditional growing season. So they'll do early spring or late fall, or even throughout the winter. And some CSAs really see that as like a marketing opportunity to do winter shares because there's not many farms that do it, mainly because you can't really easily grow produce in the winter around here. So a lot of that's going to be storage crops or frozen goods or things that are grown in the high tunnels or heated greenhouses. The CSA that I was just showing you there in that last slide, that's Turnip Rock Farm and Cosmic Wheel Creamery. They are a CSA that's local to our area. They're out of Clear Lake, for those of you around the Clear Lake Amory area. And they primarily deliver towards the Twin Cities and around our area here. But they have a wide variety of things they offer, from veggies to cheese to meat. And all the products you see on this screen are grown on their farm. So they do the cheese and they process it there. They have the animals there for the meat as well as the dairy, and they also do produce. So they've got a lot going on there. Some CSAs don't deal with vegetables at all, and they might do things like herbal options. So this is another CSA from our area, Red Clover Herbal Apothecary Farm. They're located south of Amory, Wisconsin here, and they strictly do herbs and teas and extracts. So getting a CSA from them is going to be, less quantity of things, but you're going to be getting stuff like CBD items, different tinctures that are geared towards, seasonal allergies or colds, different kinds of balms and salves, and different tea varieties too. So that's kind of a neat thing that you can get stuff like that, outside of vegetables. So vegetable CSAs are what we're typically talking about here. They usually go summer through fall, like I said, and their cost range tends to be from about $300 to $800 per year. So with the CSA model, people who want to become a member of the farm, once they find a farm that they'd like to become a member of, they sign up for the season, and most of the time they pay up front. Some farms have options where you can pay quarterly. Some even have it where you can pay weekly. When we were farming, we offered either one full-time payment, or people could do a half payment or a quarter payment spread out through the season, just to make it easier for people, because that can be a large chunk of money to bite off all at once, especially if we're getting a larger share that's in the 800 range. So CSAs will offer different sizes for different families. When we were farming, we offered a small, a medium, and a large size. You can see in that top right-hand corner, that's what one of our like peak season small shares would look like. So you'd get, 4 to 5 different things in the box. Maybe the medium share is below that in the bottom right-hand corner. You would get 5 to 7 or 8 items, and you might get more quantities of each item too. And then our large share over in the bottom left-hand corner, that's something that you would get just piled on with produce, as much as we could possibly stuff in the box without actually damaging the produce itself. And you would get a greater variety of items, and you would also get more of each item as well. So usually when farms do that, they'll try to balance out, if they think you're going to be getting a small share, that you're probably a household of 1 or 2. So you might get less things, but you'll also get smaller quantities so that you don't end up with more than you can handle as 1 or 2 people. Some farms will also opt to just have one size share, but then deliver it every other week instead of every week. So you might be getting that medium or large share size, but you won't get it every single week throughout the growing season. They'll get spaced out. And that's a good way to go too. A lot of people worry that their produce won't keep as long then, but produce that you get when it's picked like literally the day before, it can last a long time in your fridge. So usually that's a good option too. I would not stray away from farms that do that, because a lot of your produce is going to last for a couple weeks sitting in your fridge anyways. And you can always game plan where you eat the more perishable stuff first and save things like the broccoli head or the cabbage for later on. This is an example of another farm that's in our area, Sweet Top Farm. They're located south of Amory. I think they're technically in Deer Lake, but they do vegetables, and they have a full share size that's $600, and it goes for 16 weeks. And then they have a half share size that's $330 that goes for 8 weeks. So it actually, both the shares go from mid-June to mid-September, but this is one of their cases where their half share is just delivered every other week. So you're going to get the same size box, no matter whether you do the full share or the half share, but the difference is whether you get it every week or every other week. This one's kind of neat too, because they do a video newsletter. That's not a super common thing. I imagine it will become more and more of a common thing as time goes on, just because who doesn't like watching YouTube videos, right? Benefits of being a CSA member. Healthier eating is the biggest one. Lots of produce. You're getting just, especially if you get a full share, you're getting tons and tons of produce. And it really, if you're not used to Can you hear me now? Okay, I think I'm back on. Sorry, I lost my connection there for a second. Let's try this again. Hopefully that won't happen.
Yeah, no problem, Brandon. You can just pick up on that slide you're on, I think.
Okay.
The joys of internet.
We'll see if it happens. I know, right? We'll see if it happens again. So, I mean, the big thing is, like I was saying, is healthy eating. I don't know when it got cut out, but I think I was here. You're going to get a lot of produce, and it's going to change how you eat. And it's going to encourage you to eat produce more often. And you're going to really start planning your meals around produce. And the really neat thing about it is if you have kids, kids really like fresh produce a lot more than they like produce from the store. It's just amazing to see kids go through CSA boxes and start snacking on stuff. I know our daughter loves eating kale raw, and she prefers it to cooked. She likes broccoli raw better than cooked now too, and she'll just start munching on it out of nowhere. It's fantastic. So they really encourages to have them as snacks, and kids just love it, especially since it's an event. Every week, it's like getting a present, and you don't always know what's going to be in there, and you open it up and unpack it, and it's a fun surprise all the time. And I think kids really like the fact that it's an event too, and it's like a fun big deal for the week to get the box. Some of the potential drawbacks of being a CSA member is it is a lot of produce. So it's your
Sorry, everyone. Brandon is back on again. Please hang in there. And
yeah, I apologize. I don't know why I keep cutting out here.
yeah, that's okay. Don't have control over that. So
Yeah, well, hopefully it won't keep happening. And I don't know if there's a way I can do it from my phone or not, but
yeah, maybe if it happens again, we'll figure out a way to finish recording it and just put the recording up.
okay, sounds like a plan. Let's see here. Am I?
Apologize to everyone watching.
Yeah, sorry about that. Try sharing my screen here
Problems
again.
tonight, but we will figure it out and do what we can do.
Okay, back on.
There you
So
are.
you do have to make time to pick it up, and you need to make time to unpack your produce and process it. And the upfront cost can be a bit expensive. And if you end up with a farm that you don't like, you're kind of stuck with them for the rest of the season. So that can also be a drawback too. But most of the time, CSAs go pretty well. I'm going to share a few tips here to make the best of your CSA and make sure it's a good experience if you get one. So you want to make sure that your pickup site's not going to be a hassle for you to get to. If your pickup site's 20 minutes out of your way, you might be starting to begrudge it towards the end of the season, always having to go there. If it's not convenient for you to get to, it's going to be a bit of a problem. So that's always nice to have a spot that's convenient. And you might be able to find CSAs that are dropping off at places you already go to, like a coffee shop or a grocery store that's hosting it, or a natural food store. We used to bring our CSAs to
think we lost Brandon again. So our apologies, everyone, if you aren't getting your audio.
Okay, I'm back on again.
Hi. What do you think we want to do?
Well, I'm wondering if I can turn my cell phone on as a hotspot here, and
Okay.
if that would work. So, not something I've ever really done before, but I'll give it a try here quick.
Okay.
And if that's not going to work, then if we could do a recording and post it, that might be the best thing, because
Yeah.
I mean, this might just keep happening.
Okay.
So bear with me a second. I'm going to see if I can get.
Yeah, I just saw.
Okay, I'm on my cell phone as a hotspot now. Can you hear me all right?
We can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, so I shouldn't get bumped off of this. So let's try this.
Okay.
I don't know how good the bandwidth's going to be, but let me know if something's. Okay, can you see the screen?
Yes, we can see the screen, and we'll try this again. And if something else happens, we will just record it, and people can find it on the YouTube channel a little bit later this
Okay,
week.
so my apologies, everybody. This should work, I would assume. I got a full cell phone battery power, and the signal seems good. So
All right.
let's ride it from here. All right. So process your produce. A lot of things going to have stems on it and leaves, like your radishes are going to come with their tops on. Carrots are going to come with their tops on. Go ahead and cut those off. You don't need them. They're just going to start rotting inside the bag. You're not going to use them. So cut them off. Put your radishes in the bag or a Tupperware container. Put your carrots in the bag or a Tupperware container, and they'll stay fresh longer without their tops on. And then you don't have to worry about it. If you have something like a head of lettuce and you know you're going to use it for salad, then go ahead and chop it up, put it through the salad spinner, and put it in a bag. Also, if you don't have a salad spinner and you're going to get a CSA, you definitely want to get a salad spinner. Those are super nice to have. So even having some kitchen tools that make your life a little easier. Salad spinner is really good, and having a blender or something like a Cuisinart food processor are super awesome to have. I can even see stuff popping up in the chat here. Okay, moving on. Plan your meals around your produce and be flexible. You know, that's a bit of a challenge when you have your CSA at first, is it's difficult to start thinking about writing your grocery list around your vegetables that you get and planning your meals around the vegetables you get. But realistically, that's the best way to do it. And it's a great way to have healthier living when you're vegetable of your meals. Use your produce as snacks. You know, stuff like sweet peas are fantastic snacks, chopped up carrots, peppers straight from the farm are always so sweet and delicious. Radishes with a little butter on it, fantastic. You know, try to encourage yourself to eat vegetables as snacks and bring them for little snacks to work, or pre-chop them up and have in the fridge to give to the kids. It's a really good way to go. Also, freezing items that you know will preserve well is a good way to do it too. So we actually get a CSA now that we're not a CSA farm, and we tried growing our own garden for a year after we did farming, but growing a garden is way different than running a vegetable farm, and we failed at it miserably. It's kind of embarrassing. So we decided next year we were just going to get a CSA and maybe just grow a few things in the garden and not worry about it. So it's a big difference when you don't have, 40 to 60 hours a week to tend to your garden to make it actually work well. So we would get CSA share, and we would always freeze our beans. Whenever we got beans, we'll just freeze them right away. If we know we're having a lot of broccoli, we'll chop it up and freeze it. And there's other things that can really well if you're into canning and pickling. So those are all really good options to preserve the stuff that you know will preserve well, so that you can eat the stuff that's not going to preserve well, like lettuces and onions and things like that. Region newsletters, those are going to have a lot of good communication from your farm on what's coming up to expect in boxes to help you with your meal planning. And it's also going to help you just keep in touch with the farm itself and know what's going on with them. And if there's any unexpected delays for deliveries or something where they have to change the schedule, like a holiday's coming up and the farm might change the delivery schedule because of the holiday. And stir fries are your friend. You should always have some go-to things where you can put any kind of vegetable into it you want, and it'll be a delicious meal. Stir fries, casseroles, whatever works for you for a veggie roundup is a great thing to just have to throw whatever into. I personally like stir fries because you can put pretty much anything in it with some rice or noodles, a little soy sauce on top, and you're good to go. And be adventurous. The best way to enjoy your CSA is to just be adventurous and try new things, try new recipes, and go into it the mindset that it is going to be a year-long adventure in eating differently. So finding a CSA, maybe now you're all geared up and you say, yeah, I want to get a CSA, that'd be great. Good news is there's a lot of CSAs out there, and it really just takes a search on the internet to find them. On the bad side, it's getting a little late in the year to sign up for CSAs, so there's not going to be as many options right now. A lot of CSAs will be sold out by the time April comes around. So if you are going to get a CSA in the future, you definitely want to start looking in the winter. Usually around like December or January, farms will refresh their websites for signups, and that's the time to really start looking to pick out a farm before they sell out, because nowadays they will sell out. So look on Google, do some searches with keywords like CSA, CSA in the name of your town, that kind of thing. And look for flyers at places you already go. A lot of times farms will post flyers at grocery stores or coffee shops or other businesses that are supportive. And so you might find one that goes to your grocery store already, and you say, okay, that's the one I'm going to go with. If you want to do a more extensive search, you can go to places like localharvest.org, and they will have a comprehensive list of CSAs. The Land Stewardship Project also has a really good list of CSAs. We would always list our CSA on the Land Stewardship Project's website, and they will give you an amazing list of different ones to choose from the Twin Cities regions to Minnesota and the western parts of Wisconsin over here. So they're definitely a good option. How to pick out a CSA if you're trying to choose between ones and all of them seem great. Location's a really good limiting factor where they drop off at. If you're interested in visiting the farm, you might want one that's a little bit closer to you. Some farms have like days where they have members come out, and some of them welcome members whenever the members want to come out, and even offer members to come help if they want to. You may have an affinity for a certain farm, perusing their website or talking to them over the phone. You may come across one that just kind of hits a certain chord with you or really touches you in a way that you can't explain, and you want to go with it because they seem like it'd be a good fit for you. You might look through previous newsletters that they've issued if they have those available on their website, or look through pictures that they might have of their produce. When we were doing farming, we took a lot of pictures of produce. So you've probably seen throughout the slideshow, there's a lot of pictures of vegetables that are going into CSA shares. So this is an example of one of our fall box CSA shares of some of the vegetables that would go into that. And every week we take a picture of our shares. We take pictures of stuff in the fields, and we'd use that for our website. We'd send pictures to members every week. and use it for promotional materials. And it's just nice to have on hand to look back as a way of record keeping for the farm too. Another tip I'd really say when you're looking at pictures, look at the quality of the produce in the pictures and you'll get a good sense of the farm. Particularly look at things that are harder to clean and deal with. And in this case, I would say particularly carrots. Carrots are my #1 indicator for the quality that you'll get from a farm. So if you look at this picture, this is of some carrots from us. This is a large bunch of carrots because it was a fall share and it was we were sending out a lot of storage produce at the time. So the carrots are very well cleaned in this picture. They are pretty uniform in size and they just look attractive. You know, if you look at some farms, you might see that their carrots are all knobby and deformed, maybe they're dirty, and that'll give you an idea of the kind of produce that a farm puts out. Maybe you don't mind if your produce is slightly deformed. That cuts down on a lot of waste from farms if you're okay with eating deformed produce. You know, carrots that aren't uniform sized, carrots that have extra knobs on them. Maybe you don't care if your produce is a little dirty. That actually makes it quicker for the farm if they don't have to clean it as well. Or maybe you just want a little dirtier produce because getting a little extra of that biology is actually kind of good for you. But those are things to look at. If you see stuff like that in their pictures, you know that's going to be kind of the style of the farm that they're giving out in their regular boxes. And usually farms will try to put their best face forward. So we would always pick out what we thought was the best looking box and take a picture of it. But some farms don't. They just grab a random one and put it on. If you want add-ons, that's another great thing to think about through CSA. Maybe you want cheese, maybe you want meats. So that might limit the type of farm that you go with as well. So that's most of it for as far as what it's like if you're. The rest of the presentation is going to be more about what it's like to be a CSA farmer, getting into CSA farming and what our CSA farm was like and what we're doing now. So if anybody has any questions that they want to chime in on for picking out a CSA or have any questions about what it's like to be a CSA member, this would be a great time for it. So if the hosts chime in, I'll go ahead and answer those. Otherwise, I'll just keep plowing forward here. No pun intended with talking about what it's like for farmers. So what it's like to be a CSA farmer. It's fantastic to have the member support. That is the main reason why CSAs have survived this long, is because it's been good for members and it's been good for the farmers too. That member support, getting that money up front at the beginning of the growing season is critical for farms. It allows them to pay for seeds that they need. It allows them to pay for potting soil. It allows them to start paying employees early in the season, you know, well before the first produce is ever harvested. You know, there's a good 3 months of work that happen in a particular growing season before any produce actually starts leaving the farm. And so being able to cash flow that is a big deal. Sometimes members will be more engaged in the farm too. So having member support can also be more supportive than just getting the money up front. Some members will come help on the farm in certain farm cases. Some farms will actively try to get members to come out. Others, you know, prefer to just do their work with their employees and not bother with that. It just depends on the farm. If you want to be involved in a farm, then definitely look for one that says that they invite members out to work, because that can be a really rich experience too, to just be part of that process and see how it goes and have a new experience. Some members will actually extend credit to farms and they'll give them loans, especially the more old school CSAs that were started, you know, in the 90s or the early 2000s. They'll often have cases where they went to their members and asked their longtime members to give them a loan because they needed to buy a new piece of equipment or they needed to purchase a new property. And that's really neat to see that, like, that level of community support where people are willing to say as individuals, we're going to group together and give you money at a reasonable rate so that you can do this because we believe in you and we know the quality of stuff you're putting out and we want to be a part of that. Sometimes members even form an advisory board where they can help make decisions about how the farm moves on in the future, especially if the original farmers are no longer there and the farm becomes a nonprofit. And getting that direct to consumer sales, selling directly to the person who ends up eating the food, instead of selling to a grocery store who then sells to a person, or a wholesaler who then sells to a grocery store, who then sells to a person, means the farmers get a larger portion of that payment when the end consumer pays for it, which can be very beneficial. Less land is needed when you're doing a CSA farm, so it's less expensive to start up a CSA farm for vegetables than it might be to start up a row cropping operation. There's more people power and less machine power, so you're not buying as much equipment to get going. And you can just get by with less in your startup phase. You can just get by being 1 or 2 people and some very minimal equipment and having a small membership. Test it out, see if it works, rent a small plot of land, and then grow from there based on whether it's working for you or not. Eventually, the CSA farms do need to, if they're going to stay CSA farms, once they get past that early stage, they're going to have to make some major capital investments. Even though it's less expensive to run CSA farms overall than some like larger row cropping operations or dairy operations, it can still be expensive to get the farm up and going on a professional scale because you still have a lot of stuff to buy. So a good thought exercise for people who are thinking about getting into something like CSA farming is to do 2 things. Think about what it would really take to support yourself as far as what kind of income you need to make for you and your family, and what kind of income you would need to make to support your business. Then think of how much a head of broccoli costs. So how much does a head of broccoli cost? Go to your local grocery store and write down how much it costs. Go to anywhere that sells broccoli at the farmer's market and see how much a head of broccoli costs. Okay, then find out how much broccoli you're going to need to sell to support yourself, buy a property, buy equipment, build a shed that you can clean and store your produce in, and pay employees. The answer to that, a lot of broccoli. You got to grow a lot of broccoli. If you need to be making $100,000 just to support you and your business itself, because the business is going to take a lot of money, or $150,000 to do that, that's a lot of head of broccoli to make that up. So CSAs are kind of an easy thing to start, but you have to have the ability to move a lot of produce in order to make it work in the long run. So it's always a good thing to keep in mind, is just how much is this going to cost you in the long run to do. And you need to do a lot more than just grow broccoli too. There might be some people out there in the world, like in California, that can get away with just growing broccoli. But in the Midwest, as a CSA farm, you have to really be a jack of all trades. On our farm, we grew over 50 different types of crops, and those are specific crops like, broccoli versus cauliflower versus radishes versus carrots, not even to mention the different types of varieties of each of those crops. A lot of times we'd be growing 3 or 4 different varieties of each of those crops, so you can easily multiply that out by another 3 or 4 of all the different types of seeds you're going to have to be handling, and all the different knowledge bases you're going to have of how to grow a specific crop and make it work well in your field, and how to process it, and how to cool it correctly, and how to make sure it's a nice end product. You have to be able to manage your sales, your website, delivery, customer relations. You have to be able to build and fix all sorts of things, whether that's building out a shed for cleaning your produce and storing it, whether that's fixing a tractor that's broken down or a delivery vehicle, whether that's designing and building an irrigation system so you can keep your plants watered. It's an adventure in carpentry and building skills and mechanics, as well as an adventure in growing food. And you need to be able to hire and manage employees. It's really important to be able to have good relations with your employees and make sure that they're happy doing what they're doing. Because most of the time, employees on CSA farms, they're younger, they're not getting paid super well, and you want to make sure it's a good experience for them. And you have to deal with the weather. The major wild card of them all is, when are you going to get hail? When's your crop going to get flooded out? When's it going to rain when you really don't want it to rain because you have to till up some ground or harvest something that's sensitive to water? It's a juggle, but it's exciting too to be able to use your faculties to kind of manage all these different things and work around them, and really be on your toes all the time to make the best of it. So if you're a person who likes a lot of action, a lot of changing, a lot of using your brain, as well as a lot of physical labor, then it can be a good fit for sure. Our farm, I'll talk just a little bit about our farm before question and answer here. Our farm is Sleepy Root Farm. We ran our farm as a CSA for 7 years, and we ran into a lot of the obstacles that a lot of people do when they're starting a farm. Access to land, access to capital, money to buy equipment, money to buy property, money to upgrade facilities, access to market, so finding members. We tried doing farmers markets for a little bit, and then just overall burnout. It can be, if you can't manage your time well, or you have way too much to do, you can get burned out pretty quick. And we often ended up with way more to do than we could handle. And I would often say that one of the major skills of farming is learning what to not do, what to say is okay to let go of, so that other things can survive and to flourish and do well. So you're always going to have stuff that you might have to give up, crops that you might just let go or decide are just not worth it at the time, in order to focus on other ones to make sure there's success. What you're seeing in this picture is actually carrots. There's 5 rows of carrots in each of those beds, and it's a really long bed of carrots. And they're weeding those carrots by hand. So that's a heck of a lot of hand weeding. Yeah, it's kind of crazy to see how. But so those are all things that we face, and every farm story ends up being a little different. No one gets land in the same way. No one finds capital in the same way. No one accesses markets in the same way. The ends might be the same, where you have a piece of land or you have equipment, but getting there is always different for everybody. So, it's really about what you happen to come across, the amount of research you're willing to put into it, the luck that you happen to have at the time, the relationships you happen to have. All those things unfold in unique ways for everybody. So you really can't pick up a book and figure out how to start a farm. You really just have to do case studies, talk to other people with farms, learn how they did it, and then keep your eyes out for opportunities. Because if you're keeping your eyes out and talking to enough people, usually opportunities come along. At our peak, we had 235 members. At the time that we quit, which was 3 years ago, CSAs were having a lot of trouble selling out of their shares. So that last year we had a goal of selling 250 shares, and we only sold 235. And that was a common problem for every single CSA that we knew. Membership was going down. There were too many farms who were CSA selling at the time. People were having a hard time finding seasonal workers. There wasn't enough of them to go around, so you're often scrapping by to find enough employees. It was a real shoestring kind of time for a lot of farms, and we ended up ducking out. So we saw the writing on the wall at the time, and we were feeling burnt out. And we said, you know what? It's only a matter of time before we have a year where we can't meet a budget, or we can't find enough employees at this rate. We're going to duck out of farming. And we got out, and I was happy with our choice. I think we made a smart choice. A number of other farms ended up getting out of the business at the time in our area and throughout the country. And interesting enough, once COVID-19 came around, that surprisingly became a huge boon for CSA vegetable farms. They started selling out incredibly fast. There was such a demand for produce that wasn't at a grocery store and produce that was local, that the people were selling out left and right. And the farms that were still in the game had no trouble filling up their shares anymore. So it's kind of interesting to see how that market can swing really quick like that. And interesting to see the effect that, in general, COVID has on certain businesses, and businesses that happen to be positioned well for it, but didn't even know it or hadn't planned for it, but then ended up, reaping the rewards of it essentially. And it's kind of a silver lining of it for small farms like that they were able to really be successful in when COVID came, when so many other businesses were having trouble. And I don't know if any of you remember, but when COVID was first hitting last late winter, early spring, there was all sorts of talk about, farms having to plow in their produce, not selling enough, because a lot of those were going to grocery stores and institutions. So those farms that were selling to grocery stores and institutions or to restaurants had a big scare. Grocery store farms ended up getting a huge boost too, because people stopped eating at restaurants. A lot of people were home from institutions. So grocery store farms ended up being okay, but institutional farms and restaurant farms ended up having quite the nosedive during COVID. The CSA farms did really good, and they're still doing good to this day. It's carrying over, and I hope it will continue on to the future, where maybe you get a new wave of people who are starting to try CSA because of the coronavirus, but stick with it because they love it, because it is a fantastic thing to do. So it's kind of interesting to see. So that's why it's really hard to find the CSA share right now too. This time of year, farms are selling out, or they have been sold out for weeks. And a lot of it is because demand is incredibly high and there's less farms doing it now than there was 5 years ago. So what we do now is we're primarily a garlic farm now. So when we stopped CSA farming, we had thousands of that had been planted in the ground already, because you plant garlic in the fall. And we said, well, let's just start wholesaling our garlic. So we sell our garlic to a seed company now. So we don't do this full time. This is a part-time gig for us. My full-time job is working with the U.S. Department of Agriculture for the Natural Resource Conservation Service. My wife's full-time, or well, I guess part-time job is working as the adult programmer for the Amory Public Library. And we do this on the side. So this is some of our friends helping us harvest garlic. You know, the garlic that we do is pretty large, and we sell it to a seed company who then sells it to somebody else. Here's a couple more pictures of the garlic. People are always curious to see what garlic looks like in the field. The picture on the left is garlic growing in the field before it's harvested. So it looks like a really tall onion or really tall, thick grass. It's about 3 feet tall. And then the picture on the right is all of our garlic harvested and sitting in our shed to cure. So we converted our vegetable washing shed into a curing shed for our garlic. And we have just tons and tons of gigantic screen tables set out, screen tables that are made for greenhouses. And the garlic sits on top of those screen tables in, you know, layers that are like 2 or 3 heads of garlic deep. And then they just essentially air dry. And after they cure for a couple weeks, then we can trim them up and clean them. And the curing allows them to store longer in storage. And then we sell them on to a seed company. We also sell to individuals too and other farms, but mainly to a seed company. So last thing that I want to mention, we talked a lot about what CSAs are like for members. We talked about what CSAs are like for farmers. The other thing that I think is important to mention too is what are CSAs to the local community? You know, people who aren't members, people who aren't the farmers, what does it do for local communities? Because, you know, they don't exist in a vacuum, just like any business or any interaction between people. CSAs, in a lot of ways, have provided a miniature resurgence towards rural areas. A lot of the people that I know that have started CSAs have moved out of towns or cities and moved into rural areas, myself included. Me and my wife had come from the Twin Cities area when we moved out here and to really grow our farm. And it's been an attractive way for people who aren't from a rural community or who don't farm to get into farming and get them out onto the land. It's also bringing more young people into agriculture, because predominantly a lot of the people who are starting CSAs are younger people. I was in my 20s when we started our CSA. Most of the other people that I know that started them in their 20s or 30s. You'll get some people who are doing it as a second career, you know, and they'll be starting in their 50s or 40s. And I'm sure sometimes in their 60s too, maybe even, but most of the time it's people who are younger and are just getting out of college or have worked on other farms or have decided to just follow their passion and quit whatever job they had after saving up some money. But it gets a lot of young people out into agriculture and into rural communities. And then a lot of the workers that come to work on CSA farms are college kids. So this is a picture of 2 of our employees who were in that college age group, having fun on the farm, eating some raw sweet corn after we did a bunch of harvesting. And if you have not eaten raw sweet corn, I highly recommend it. It is super good and refreshing. But it gets people out who are in college age from towns and cities, gets them out into rural areas to experience that for a summer too, even if it's a temporary thing. Having that crossover between urban and rural, in my mind, is a very important part and is, I think, really important for the health of our country overall to have those two parts of our country, which seem to be pretty segmented at times, to have some crossover and experience with each other. It also circulates money locally. People who buy from their CSA locally, that money stays there. It goes to the farm, and the farm spends it on local businesses. And it also pulls money from city centers to rural communities. So a lot of CSAs will sell their stuff into the cities. Most of them in our area around Amory head towards Eau Claire or head towards the Twin Cities. And it's a good way of pulling money out of those city centers and into the rural communities. And it just adds different types of operations to the landscape. So just diversity in agriculture. And by that, I mean, it's a different type of operation. So it's not row cropping. It's not a dairy operation. It's not a pasture. It's just something different. And in general, diversity in anything will add resilience and is typically a good thing to have, in my opinion. And it makes it so there's more skill sets and different kinds of economic activity going on, which is always healthy both for the community and the economy. So my final thoughts, should you get a CSA? Yes, definitely. It's great. Getting a CSA is awesome. Like I said, we started getting a CSA a few years ago after we stopped farming. And it was my first time ever getting a CSA, even though we'd grown CSAs forever. We'd never actually subscribed to one and taken home vegetables from one. And it's a super fun experience. You get all sorts of yummy food. The food's beautiful and diverse. You get stuff that you wouldn't find in grocery stores because it's either too sensitive to travel or doesn't store well enough. So you get all sorts of interesting tomatoes. And it's just a wonderful experience overall, as long as you're open to the adventure of it. So that's the presentation. This is a picture of our farm in full swing. As you can see, there's a lot of vegetables being grown there and a lot of different types of vegetables too. If there's any questions, I'll take them. I also put my email address at the bottom here in case anybody has any questions for me, anyone who's interested in getting into farming that wants to just chat for a little bit. Anyone who has more questions about CSA, feel free to reach out to me and I'd be happy to answer those questions personally.
Thank you very much, Brandon. I don't know that we'll get any questions through YouTube tonight, so
okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm glad I made it the rest